Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. What if the government offered your child a $1,000 investment account automatically without you ever even asking for it? Would you take it? And what if you had the opportunity to add to it every single year and you could later use this money for college, to start a business, or even a down payment on a home? Well, a brand new proposal tucked inside a sweeping tax bill does exactly that. It's called the MAGA Account. And no, it's not what you think. It stands for Money Accounts for Growth and Advancement. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into how this account would actually work, what the pilot program would look like, its tax benefits, as well as the potential limitations. Let's start with the purpose. So what is a MAGA account actually for? It's designed to give kids a real financial head start, the kind of boost that can make a big difference down the road. The money in these accounts is said to be aimed to help with things like paying for college or trade school, starting a small business, or buying their first home. Basically, the goal is to set kids up with a foundation for long-term success, not just savings, but purpose-driven savings. Now, who would be in charge of these accounts? These accounts would be held at a bank or other financial institution, just like you would expect with a 529 account. But instead of being managed at the state level, this would be a federally overseen program managed by the U.S. Department of the Treasury. So being that it would be a federally overseen program, we could expect that it would roll out in the same time frame to all states, and it would have more consistency across the entire country. Who would be eligible to open a MAGA account? Starting on January 1st, 2026, parents would be eligible to open an account for their child so long as their child was under the age of 8. Now, there are a few other eligibility requirements. First, the child must be a U.S. citizen, and second, at least one parent must have a work-eligible Social Security number. It's also important to note that this provision does apply to children born before January 1st of 2024, so you don't have to have a newborn to participate in this program. So if you say have a child who is 6 in the year 2026, you could still participate. But I do want to take a moment to talk about what the bill doesn't say, because that's just as important as what it does say. It doesn't mention anything about older children. So if your child is 9 or 10 when this launches, they may be left out. It also doesn't say whether the parent has to be a U.S. citizen, just that they need a work-eligible Social Security number. And it's completely silent on whether legal guardians like grandparents or foster parents can open the accounts too. So while the intent of this bill is pretty clear, there are a few details that still need to be ironed out if it becomes a law, because we have to consider those families that have a non-traditional guardianship arrangements, or what about the families that have children that just fall outside of this age range? They should also be considered. And here's how the contributions would work. You can put $5,000 per year per child using after-tax dollars, and this number is tied to inflation, so it's expected that it would increase on an annual basis. And these contributions can come from parents, relatives, other individuals, and here's something interesting, even organizations. Nonprofits and foundations can also contribute, but only if they're giving to an entire group, like all the kids in a certain school district. They can't just pick and choose one. Once a child turns 18, all contributions must stop. But again, let's take a moment to talk about what the bill doesn't say here, because this is just as important. There's no mention of any sort of matching contribution from the government. It doesn't clarify if you can do any sort of catch-up contributions if you have past years where you funded under the limit. And there's no penalty listed if someone accidentally contributes more than the $5,000 limit. So overall, the rules are pretty clear, but there are a few gaps that do need a little bit more clarification. All MAGA account funds have to go into a diversified fund that tracks a U.S. equity index. So think something like the S&P 500 or a total stock market index. And honestly, to me, this is a pretty big deal because it's not that long ago that most government-directed savings plans were defaulted into simply government bonds. So the fact that this one is going to be defaulting into tracking the stock market is a huge win, and it shows how investing has really become mainstream over the past decade or so, and it really shows how growth-oriented these funds would be. Now, the bill doesn't say who gets to choose the exact fund, and if you get a say in what your choices are, if you get a custom selection, or if you're kind of directed into one singular default. But this is likely intentional. It's probably designed as a more hands-off approach and low cost for most families. And here's something to think about. If you contributed $5,000 every year from the time your child was born until they turned 18 and earned an average 8% rate of return, that account could grow to around $207,000. That's a serious head start for college, a business, or even a home. Now, here's how the withdrawals would work. If the child is under 18, the money is completely locked up. No access at all. But starting at age 18, they can withdraw up to 50% as long as it's for a qualified purpose. That means things like college, trade school, starting a small business, or buying their first home. Once they hit 25, they can access the full account balance still for those same qualified uses, and then at age 30 and beyond, the rules go away and they can use the money for anything they want, no restrictions at all. Now, just to be clear, at age 30, they are not required to take the money out. They could leave it invested and keep growing if that's what they wanted to do, just the option is there. Now, let's talk about tax treatment. And just a quick upfront reminder, you would be contributing after-tax dollars to a MAGA account. So that means you don't get a tax break when you put the money in. The tax advantages show up later when you allow this money to grow and when you take the money out. Now, the bill doesn't come right out and say it, but it strongly suggests that the MAGA account would behave somewhat like a 529 or a Roth IRA in that the money would get to grow tax deferred, but not exactly like these because there is eventual taxation that would happen. So likely you would not have to pay taxes on growth in this account on an annual basis, but when withdrawals are made, then you would be taxed. So eventually when you make a withdrawal from these accounts, even if it's for a qualified purpose, like paying for college or buying your first home, you would still owe taxes. It would be taxed as long-term capital gains rather than ordinary income tax, which would be a more favorable rate. And if you're looking at the table on the screen, that favorable tax treatment applies if you use the funds for qualified purposes between the ages of 18 and 29, or for any reason once you're 30 or older. But if you take money out before the age of 30 for something not on the qualified list, it gets taxed as ordinary income and gets hit with a 10% penalty. And that could be a much bigger hit depending on your tax bracket. The bill does not clearly define what counts as a qualified small business loan, so that still would need to be ironed out. But if you look at it from a tax stance, you're not getting a tax break up front, but you are getting tax deferred growth and preferential tax treatment on these withdrawals so long as it comes out and is used wisely. Now let's talk about the pilot program because that's the part where the government is actually going to be kicking in some money. Here's how it would work. If your child is born between January 1st of 2024 and December 31st of 2028, they're eligible for a one-time $1,000 federal contribution into a MAGA account. There are a few requirements. The child must be a U.S. citizen, and both parents need to have work-eligible Social Security numbers. Now, this wouldn't be something that parents have to apply for. If the parents don't open this fund, the U.S. Treasury will do it for them, and they will choose what it gets invested in and the institution that holds this account. Now, parents do have the option to opt out if they don't want to participate in the program, but otherwise the account would be created for them. And one thing to keep in mind and point out, this $1,000 would be a one-time deposit. It is not an ongoing annual contribution, so just one deposit per eligible child during the pilot program. Now let's talk about something that's a big deal for a lot of families: college applications and financial aid. One of the most important parts of that process is filling out the FAFSA. which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's what colleges use to figure out how much financial aid a child qualifies for. Now, the bill doesn't mention FAFSA directly, but based on other accounts, here's what we can reasonably expect. MAGA accounts would almost certainly be counted as assets when filling out the FAFSA. They're structured a lot like 529 plans, which are considered parental assets, or custodial brokerage accounts, which are considered student assets if ownership transfers to the child. So here's what this means in practice. If the account is owned by the parent, it has a much smaller impact on financial aid. But if it shifts to the student after the age of 18, up to 20% of that balance could count against them on the FAFSA. So even if your child uses the money in this account for qualified education expenses, any unused income would need to be reported, and this could absolutely impact how much financial aid they're eligible for, depending on when and how this money is used. So the bottom line is this could be a great savings tool, but it may have some unintended consequences affecting a child's financial aid if the account transfers to their name at the age of 18, right when they go to fill out this form. And this does matter because most students do receive some form of financial aid. In fact, 87% of undergrads accepted financial aid in the 2022-2023 school year. So even a small shift in eligibility could make a big difference for a lot of families. So are MAGA accounts the next big thing when it comes to planning for kids' financial future? They're not perfect, and there's absolutely still areas that need to be ironed out and offered a little bit more clarity, but if this bill passes and these accounts become available, they could be a powerful tool to helping set children up for better financial foundations as they jump into adulthood. What are your thoughts? If these accounts became available, would you set one up for your child? Share your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. I debated in this entire video referring to them as MAGA accounts and not MAGA accounts. Don't bring politics into it. Just don't. I'm just talking about an account that could become available for a child. Just don't. Oh, geez, I didn't mean to hit start. I'm sorry. Per child, and this number is pegged to inflation, so it's expected that it would increase on an annual basis, and notably, Hey, that was a great take. Okay, we'll try again. Spent all day playing with my son and I'm trying to hide messy hair. It's also important to note that this provision does apply to children born prior to the date of, families that have non-traditional guardianship roles, or for families who have, oh my goodness. Yes, Guy Peanut's not. Where'd he go? Oh, okay. Now he's over there. Hey, bud. I love you.